I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd discover that the woman I loved had another family. You hear stories about it. Maybe see it in movies or those Reddit threads where people post the wildest betrayals imaginable. And you think, that could never happen to me, until it does. Her name was Lena. We'd been together for 5 years, living together for almost 4. She was 31, a freelance graphic designer who worked mostly from home. I'm 34, an IT project manager. The kind of guy who likes routine, stability, and Sunday morning coffee on the balcony. Lena and I had built what I thought was a good life together. She'd fill the apartment with soft music and candles, loved cooking dinner for us, and had this way of curling up on the couch beside me that made every hard day fade away. She wasn't perfect, no one is, but I trusted her completely. About a month ago, she told me she needed to go to her hometown for a couple of weeks to help her cousin after surgery. I didn't question it. She'd shown me texts from her cousin, pictures of the hospital, and even FaceTimed me from what looked like a guest room. Everything seemed perfectly normal. She left on a Thursday morning. She kissed me goodbye, told me not to work too much, and drove off. I remember waving from the door, already missing her. For the first few days, we texted like usual. Good mornings, good nights, a few memes. But on the 5th day, everything changed. That night, just before bed, I was scrolling through Instagram when I noticed she'd posted a story. That alone was unusual. Lena wasn't big on social media. She mostly used it for her design work, posting project shots or travel photos. I tapped it open, not thinking much of it. It was a short video clip. A dinner table softly lit by candles. Someone laughed behind the camera. A man's voice. Then a small hand reached across the table, grabbing a bread roll. A child's hand, maybe 4, maybe 5 years old. The camera panned slightly, and for a moment I saw her reflection in a mirror behind the table. Lena, dressed in something elegant, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I tapped to the next story. A photo. Lena on a couch, a little girl sitting on her lap, both of them smiling. The caption read, "Family nights are my favorite." And she'd tagged someone, a Ben Wilders. My stomach turned. I clicked the tag. The account was private. The profile picture showed a man and the same little girl from the photo. His bio read, "Father, fiancé, designer, always grateful, fiancé." At first I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe the little girl was her cousin's kid. Maybe family just meant extended family. But that word, fiancé, sat in my chest like ice. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the screen, reading and rereading that bio. The next morning, I searched the name on Facebook. There he was, Ben Wilders, 36, living in the same city Lena claimed she was visiting. And right there in plain sight was a public post from 2 weeks earlier. "Can't wait for my fiancé to come home for good. The girls and I are counting down." The girls, plural. The comments were full of congratulations, hearts, and emojis. And right in the middle of them I saw a familiar name, Lena Hartman. Her comment, "Counting down too." Her relationship status, engaged to Ben Wilders. Updated 6 months ago. I remember just sitting there staring at the screen, unable to move. 6 months! For half a year, she'd been living with me, sharing my bed, telling me she wasn't ready for marriage, and at the same time, she was publicly engaged to someone else. I spent the next few hours collecting everything. Screenshots, texts, bank transfers, anything that might prove I wasn't hallucinating. Because honestly, that's what it felt like, a hallucination. Like I'd somehow stepped into another version of reality. She had 2 phones, one for clients. The one I never touched. Now I understood why. That afternoon I called her cousin, the one who supposedly had surgery. No answer. I tried again from my work phone, and this time she picked up. "Hey, Kara," I said. "How are you feeling? How's recovery?" There was a pause. "Recovery? From what?" "Lena said you had surgery," I replied. Another pause. "I haven't had surgery. I haven't even seen Lena in months." That was the moment it clicked. Every lie suddenly lined up like dominoes falling. I hung up, my hands shaking. Then I texted Lena. "Hey, how's your cousin doing?" She replied within a minute. "Still sore but better." I stared at the message for a long time. The audacity of it. I asked when she was coming home. She said maybe next week. She was helping a local designer named Ben with a project and might stay longer. I felt the floor drop out beneath me. I didn't text back. I didn't even think. I just started driving. 5 hours straight to the coastal city she'd claimed was her hometown. When I got there, I parked outside the address I'd found on Ben's Facebook. It was a small blue house with a white fence and a swing set in the front yard. Her car was parked in the driveway. Through the window, I saw them. Lena, the man, and the little girl sitting at the dinner table. They were laughing, passing food around, looking like the perfect family. I don't think I've ever felt so hollow in my life. For 5 years I'd been sharing my life with a woman who already had one, and she hadn't even bothered to hide it very well. I didn't go to the door. I didn't shout or make a scene. I just sat there, staring, until I finally took a picture through the window. Then I drove to a cheap motel and sat in the parking lot, shaking. That night she texted me, "Miss you?" I didn't respond. The next morning I sent her one message. "How's Ben?" 5 minutes later. "Who?" "Your fiancé," I typed, "and your daughter." The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again, then gone. Half an hour later, she called me. I didn't pick up. Then she texted, "We need to talk." "It's not what you think," I replied. "So you're not engaged?" She hesitated before responding. "It's complicated." I sent, "Explain complicated when you're living 2 lives." No reply. An hour later, one final message appeared on my screen. "Please don't ruin this for me." That was the moment something in me shut off. No apology, no remorse, just fear of losing her second life. I texted back, "You already ruined everything." Then I blocked her. 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment crying. Same clothes from the photos. I opened the door but didn't let her in. She admitted it all. She said she'd been with Ben before she met me. They'd broken up. She found out she was pregnant months later. She claimed she didn't want to tell him at first, that she wanted to start fresh, but when he reached out wanting to be in his daughter's life, she didn't know how to tell me. So she didn't. She just lived both lives. Her words blurred together. Excuses, half-truths, sobs. I didn't say much. I just called a locksmith while she was still on the doorstep. That night, her boxes were outside. Her keys were deactivated. Her name erased from everything. A week later, the man she was engaged to found my number and called me. His voice was tired, wrecked. He said he'd found messages between us. Said she'd told him I was just a friend, that she stayed with me for work. We talked for an hour. 2 strangers connected by one woman's lies. When we hung up, he said something that stuck with me. "I don't think she knows who she really is." And maybe that's true, but it doesn't matter anymore. I've seen enough to know that some people don't just lie. They build entire worlds out of lies, and live inside them until the walls finally crumble. That was the day mine did, and that's how I found out that the woman I loved had another family. The week after I threw Lena out of the apartment was a blur. I remember the silence more than anything. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it settles into your bones. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the ceiling fan. Every sound felt amplified because there was nothing left to drown it out. Her perfume still lingered on the couch cushions, on my shirts, in the hallway. It's strange how betrayal has a smell, sweet, familiar, and suddenly unbearable. For days I moved through the apartment like a ghost, collecting remnants of our life together. Photos, gifts, sketches she'd made. I packed them all into a single box and dropped it off at the local donation center. I couldn't bear the thought of throwing them away, but I couldn't keep them either. Ben and I stayed in touch, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. There were things to untangle. He'd gone through her phone, found out she'd been using a different SIM card while she was working in my city. He discovered hotel receipts, rental agreements, even a second lease, the one we shared. The shock in his voice when he described it was exactly how I'd sounded days earlier. She told me she was visiting her sister every month, he said. Turns out her sister was you. I didn't know whether to laugh or be sick. Lena's double life had gone on for almost 2 years. 2 years of careful scheduling, fake emergencies, client work, and trips that didn't exist. She had a calendar system, color-coded according to him. Blue for me, red for him, green for work. When I heard that, something inside me snapped. It wasn't rage anymore, just disbelief that someone could compartmentalize human beings like that. A few days later, she started messaging from different numbers, first pleading, then apologizing, then blaming me. The progression was textbook. "You don't understand what it was like," she wrote once. "You made me feel trapped. You weren't supposed to find out this way. I still love you, you know." I didn't reply to any of them. I'd already learned that attention, even anger, is fuel to people like her. Then came the social media posts. She switched her accounts to private, but not before I saw one final story. Sometimes people destroy what they don't understand. Healing and moving forward. The comments poured in. Friends, colleagues, mutuals, all comforting her. I wanted to scream. She'd turned herself into the victim, and no one knew the truth. But Ben did. He messaged me one night asking if he could post the screenshots, the photos, the messages, everything. He wanted to warn others. I told him not to. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because I didn't want my name dragged through that circus. I'd already lost enough, he agreed. Instead, he took his daughter and left the city. Said he needed to start over somewhere quieter. I envied him for that. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was the confusion. The way my mind kept looping through moments that no longer made sense. Her staying up late working, the extra toothbrush that appeared in the bathroom, the weekends she said she was visiting her mother. All of it fit now, and I hated that it did. A month went by. I started therapy. My therapist, an older woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice, told me something that stuck. People like Lena build mirrors instead of homes. They reflect what you want to see until you forget to look for yourself. That hit me harder than anything. Because she was right. I'd loved an image. One Lena had carefully crafted for each of us. Loving her had been like loving smoke. You think you're holding something real until it slips through your fingers. But healing is slow, and quieter than I expected. I deleted old photos, changed my number, started going to the gym again. I even took a trip alone, the first in years, to a small coastal town. Ironically, not far from where I'd found out the truth. I remember sitting on a beach one evening watching the waves roll in under a fading sky. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. That's when I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You deserve the truth." My chest tightened as I opened it. It was from Ben. He'd found out more. Turns out Lena hadn't just lied to us. She'd been engaged before him, too. To another man. 3 years before she met me. She'd apparently run off before the wedding, disappearing for months. The pattern was older than either of us realized. He attached a scanned document. A police report from her hometown. Fraud investigation. She'd been questioned over using someone else's identity for a loan. It never went to court, but it was enough to show that this wasn't new. This was who she was. Reading that felt like closing a chapter. For months, I'd been trying to find meaning in what happened. Some lesson or logic. But there wasn't one. Some people are just built wrong. They copy and adapt, learning what others want to hear, until even they can't tell the truth from the lies. I replied to Ben, thanked him, and told him not to contact me again. Not out of anger, but out of finality. I wanted this story to end. I changed my apartment, sold the couch she used to sleep on, painted the walls a lighter color, started over piece by piece. Then one morning, about 6 months later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Lena, sitting in what looked like a cafe holding the same little girl. Older now, smiling shyly at the camera. The message said, She asks about you sometimes. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Not out of hate, but because that chapter was over. I didn't need closure anymore. I'd already found it in the silence. Sometimes betrayal doesn't end with a big confrontation or a dramatic revenge. Sometimes it ends with you, sitting alone on a quiet morning, realizing you don't care anymore. And in that moment, you're free. 2 days after I'd sent the screenshots to that fiancé, silence fell like a dropped curtain. No texts, no calls, no explosions. Just quiet. The kind that feels loaded, like a storm waiting for the right moment to break. Then, around 3 a.m. on a Thursday, my phone lit up. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said, "This is it," I answered. There was just breathing at first, then a voice tight and breaking. "You ruined my life." It was Lena. I didn't respond. Not out of restraint. I genuinely didn't know what to say. She continued, her words tumbling over each other like she was drowning and couldn't stop swallowing water. "You didn't have to do this. You could have just let me explain." I cut her off. "Explain what? That you have a fiancé? A kid? A whole other life? What could you possibly say that would make that make sense?" "I was trying to protect everyone," she said. "You don't understand what it was like. He helped me when I had nothing. I couldn't just leave." "So you stayed," I said, "and started another life with me. Because that's easier?" "I loved you, Dylan. I did. But it's complicated." That line, "I loved you, but it's complicated." I swear I could build a museum of heartbreak just from those words. I didn't reply. I just ended the call. She texted a few minutes later. "You'll regret this. You've destroyed everything." Then she blocked me. 3 weeks went by. Her fiancé. I never got his name, just the initials SR from her hidden account. Sent me one short message. "Thank you for telling me. You saved my son from a worse future." That was it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The message sat there like closure in a single sentence. But life after betrayal doesn't heal in straight lines. It's not like a wound that scabs over and stops hurting. It comes in flashes. Little moments that jab you when you least expect it. The sound of her laugh from a stranger's mouth. The way a car pulls into the driveway and you think it's her coming home. The way silence feels heavier than noise. I tried filling the space she left. Gym, long drives, new hobbies that didn't really stick. Every night I'd come home and see the same dent on the couch where she used to curl up with her laptop. Eventually, I flipped the cushion just to stop seeing it. One morning I got a message from Melissa, Lena's older sister. I hadn't spoken to her much, just once or twice at family gatherings. The message was simple. "I don't know if you'll read this, but I'm sorry." I told her this would catch up to her. I didn't ask what happened. But later that day, I stumbled on her social profile. The public one she'd abandoned. The comments told the story for me. Her fiancé had left. She'd lost custody temporarily while he sorted things out. She'd moved back in with her parents. Someone mentioned therapy and getting help. There was a photo she'd posted recently. Blurry, poorly lit, her face thinner, eyes tired. The caption read, "Trying to find myself again. I'm sorry to those I've hurt." I stared at that post longer than I wanted to admit. Not because I missed her, but because part of me remembered the version of her I'd fallen for. The one who seemed kind, funny, endlessly curious. Maybe that was real once, or maybe I just wanted it to be. 2 months after everything imploded, I moved, packed my things, sold the apartment, and headed for a quieter town an hour north. I didn't tell anyone except a few close friends. New place, new silence. But this one was lighter. The kind that feels earned. I started running again. Joined a small local gym. People there didn't know me, didn't know the story, didn't look at me with that mix of pity and curiosity. I was just Dylan. No backstory, no betrayal trailing behind me like smoke. I thought about writing everything down. Maybe posting it anonymously, just to get it out of my system. But part of me worried that would keep it alive. Still, one night, I did it anyway. I sat at my desk, cracked open my laptop, and started typing. Every detail, every red flag I'd ignored, every laugh that now sounded hollow in memory. I wrote until sunrise. When I finished, I hit post on a throwaway Reddit account, didn't expect anything, didn't even check it for days. Then, out of curiosity, I looked. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments, people sharing their own stories. Strangers saying things like, "I needed this. I thought I was alone." You helped me realize I'm not crazy for feeling what I felt. Somewhere between the comments and the chaos, I realized something important. I'd spent months trying to understand her motives, her lies, her choices. But I'd never stopped to understand myself. Why I'd ignored the signs. Why I'd clung to someone who never truly saw me. 3 months later, while I was at a small local cafe, a woman asked if she could sit at my table. The place was crowded, and I said sure. She had short brown hair, freckles, eyes that looked like they'd seen things and survived anyway. We got to talking about books, about music, about how small towns somehow feel both empty and alive. She laughed when I said I was a recovering optimist. We exchanged names. Her name was Elise. When she got up to leave, she paused and said, "You know, you remind me of a story I read online once, about a guy who found out his girlfriend had another life. The way he handled it, I don't know, it stuck with me." My heart stopped for half a beat. I smiled carefully. "Yeah? How did it end?" She thought for a second. "He learned to let go." Then she smiled and walked away. That night I sat on my porch, watching the sunset dip below the tree line, and realized something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, Lena wasn't the ghost sitting beside me anymore. She was just a story, one that no longer needed retelling. The scars were still there, sure, but they were quieter now. Like old memories folded into the corners of a photo album you only open once in a while. Healing doesn't come when you stop hurting someone else. It comes when you stop hurting yourself for trusting them. And in that silence, for the first time, I finally felt free. 6 months passed before I heard her name again. By then, the story, our story, had drifted into memory like smoke thinning in the air. I'd settled into the new rhythm of my life. Morning runs, coffee at the corner cafe, quiet evenings spent without the constant hum of anxiety I used to mistake for love. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message request from an unfamiliar account. The profile picture was just a plain gray circle. No posts, no name. Just, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but please read this." For a minute I debated deleting it. But curiosity wins small wars. I opened it. "It's Lena. I'm sorry for everything. You don't have to respond. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to get better. I'm in therapy. My son's living with his dad full-time for now, but I see him on weekends. I think about what I did to you more often than I want to admit. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve what I did to you." I stared at that message for a long time. Not angry, not sad, just still. Once upon a time, that kind of message would have cracked me open. I would have overanalyzed every word, tried to find sincerity between the lines, wondered whether forgiveness might rebuild something. Now, I just felt distance, the kind that isn't cold, just final, like a bridge long burned, whose ashes had already turned to soil. I typed a single sentence. "I hope you find peace, Lena." Then I hit send and archived the conversation. Not blocked, not deleted, just done. Life, as it turned out, had a strange sense of humor. A few weeks later, I ran into someone who knew her. Small world syndrome. A mutual acquaintance from years back. Someone who didn't know the full story. They said Lena was working part-time at a local bookstore now, living with her parents again, trying to rebuild her life. She'd stopped posting online completely. No drama, no self-victimization, just quiet. "She's different," they said. "More grounded, I think." I just nodded. People can change. But that change doesn't always need an audience. Meanwhile, my own life kept expanding in ways I hadn't expected. Elise and I started running into each other more often. First by accident, then by design. Lunch turned into coffee. Coffee turned into late-night walks. She was nothing like Lena. No grand declarations, No emotional fireworks that burned out in days. She was steady, real. The kind of person who listened without turning everything into a performance. One night as we sat by the river, she asked, "Do you ever miss her?" The honesty of the question surprised me. "I miss the idea of her," I said. "The version I built in my head. But the person she really was? No. I think I was in love with potential, not reality." Elise nodded slowly. "That's brave to admit. Or just overdue," I said. She smiled, still brave. There was something about the way she said it. Not like a compliment, but like a truth. And for the first time I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living again. A few months later, I got an email from the moderator of the subreddit, where I'd posted my story. "Your post was nominated for our annual Stories of Strength compilation. We're reaching out for permission to include it." I laughed when I read it. The irony wasn't lost on me. What started as an act of catharsis, a digital scream into the void, had turned into something that might help others. I agreed, under one condition: anonymity. I didn't want the story tied to my real name. It wasn't shame. It was peace. Some things belong to the past, even if they still echo in the present. The post went up again months later, part of a collection titled Lessons from the Ashes. I didn't read the comments this time. I didn't need validation anymore. I'd already lived the ending. One evening, Elise and I drove up to a lookout point overlooking the town. The sky was smeared in gold and violet, the kind of sunset that doesn't look real. She turned to me and said softly, "You know, for someone who's been through what you've been through, you still believe in good people." I smiled, watching the horizon fade into darkness. "I think that's the only way you make it out the other side," I said. "Not by forgetting what broke you, but by remembering that it didn't destroy you." Years later, I would think back to that night, to the moment when peace stopped being a goal and became a way of being. Lena became a memory, a cautionary tale, a ghost I'd finally learned to let rest. The anger, the disbelief, the need for justice, all of it had burned itself out. What was left was acceptance. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of perspective. Last month, out of curiosity, I searched my old post again. It was still there. Thousands of people had commented, shared, connected. Some were angry on my behalf. Others found pieces of their own lives in mine. At the very top, someone had replied just 2 words: "Still healing." I smiled when I saw that. Because that's the truth, isn't it? We're never completely done healing. We just learn to live around the scars. I closed the tab, walked outside. The air smelled like rain and earth. New, clean, alive. Elise called from the porch, her voice soft against the evening wind. "Coming in?" "Yeah," I said. "Just a second." I stood there a moment longer, watching the first drops of rain hit the ground, and thought about everything that had happened. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every twist that had brought me here. And then I whispered, not to anyone in particular, "Thank you for the lessons." Then I turned, walked back inside and closed the door behind me. Not as a defense this time, but as a beginning.